Temblé una vez en la reja a la entrada de la viña, cuando la bárbara abeja picó la frente a mi niño.
O sea, una vez, de tal suerte, que goce cuando la sentencia de mi muerte, de yo al alcalde llorando.
Oigo un suspiro a través de las tierras y la mar, y no es un suspiro, es que mi hijo va a despertar.
Si dicen que del joyero tome la joya mejor, tomo a un amigo sincero y pongo a un lado el amor.
Yo he visto al águila herida volar sobre el azul sereno y morir en su guarida la víbora del veneno.
Yo sé cuando el mundo cede inhibido al descanso sobre silencio profundo, murmura el héroe macho.
Yo he puesto la mano osada, de dolor y júbilo orienta, sobre la estrella apagada, que cayó frente a mi puerta.
Oculto en mi pecho bravo, la pena que me lo quiere, un niño de un pueblo esclavo, vive por él, calla y muere.
Todo es hermoso y constante, todo es música y razón, y todo, como un diamante, antes de luz, es carbón.
Yo sé que el necio se entierra con gran lujo y con gran llanto, y que no hay fruta en la tierra como la del campo santo.
Callo y entiendo y me quito la pompa de rimador. Cuelgo un árbol marchito, mi museta de doctor.
Thank you everybody for your applause. Now we would like to present our special guest, Ian Shelley Broderick.
Welcome everybody. I'm Shelley Broderick, the proud dean of the UDC David A. Clarke School of Law, your tax dollars at work. I wish the kids would teach me how to do that. Maybe you'll come back. Who's going to go to law school? Yeah. All right. We are just delighted to welcome many old friends and lots of new friends back to the law school. We've done a number of events about and around Cuba. Forget my back. Beginning 3 or 4 years ago, we had Danny Glover and a couple of hundred people around the Cuban Five. And again the next year, and again the next year, growing and growing each time. And then with the rapprochement, it turns out that our alum, Tim Reeser, had a lot to do with brokering the rapprochement. So we invited him to do a program, and it was absolutely fascinating. We've learned so much. And as a result, folks from the Cuban Embassy, or the Cuban Interest Section, as it was then known, invited the law school to come down to the University of Havana and get to know the university. And I did it last June, I went with some folks, and we have the first memorandum of understanding of any law school with the University of Havana. And it's crystal clear to me that we have so much to learn from the University of Havana, and I think they may have some things to learn from us. One of the things I learned is, you know, the law school that Fidel went to has a tank in front of it. And I took a picture and sent it to the chairman of the board and said, I want a tank too. She said, I know just where we'll aim it. I'm not sure what she meant. In any case, I've been lucky enough to go to Cuba twice. Once 15 years ago when my niece, who's now a 60 Minutes producer, fell in love with and married a Cuban. And so the entire extended Rowdy Broderick family snuck in and had a grand time for a couple of weeks. And I was lucky enough to go this past summer and spend several days at the law school being briefed on the new Cuban family code and on how legal education works there. It's a very different system. Number 1 in the class gets first pick at the first job. Number 2 in the class gets second pick. Wow, that's different, you know. And poor number 131, boy, problems. You should have studied harder. And I say that to my students too. So anyway, I'm not going to belabor things. I'm just delighted to have you all here. And I will say, when I got back from Cuba, I went to a National Lawyers Guild event that night, and I was wearing my Che Guevara beret, and it got picked up by Fox News and the right-wing press, and I got just an avalanche of hate mail and outraged that I would be pro-Che and a murderer and firing squads and on, and you know, souvenir, you know. I'm learning, and I hope we can all come together and learn from each other about the history and about the future, right? That's what this is all about. Yeah. So it is my very great pleasure to introduce Shakira Hensley, who is the Vice President of our Black Law Students Association. She's going to come speak to you for a moment. And she'll be followed by Liz Limones, who's the president of the Latin American Law Student Association. Shakira has not managed to wangle the first trip, but Liz is going on the very first trip with 16 of our law students and 3 faculty members in January. She's got a mission. She's got a plan. Thank you so much for coming.
Good
evening, everyone. As my dean said, my name is Shakira Hensley, and I'm Vice President of Black Law Student Association here at the UDC David A. Clarke School of Law. It is an honor to have you all here today. Thank you for coming. It's definitely a privilege. I hope tonight is enlightening and enriching for everyone, and that it brings us all one step closer to complete solidarity with Cuba and the United States. Thank you.
Buenas noches. ¿Quién aquí habla español? Levante la mano. Yes. I was given the option to do this in Spanish or in English, and English was preferred, but I am going to be a revolutionist and say this in Spanish. Les quiero dar la bienvenida el día de hoy por venir y estar aquí en nuestra escuela, UDC Law School, porque la escuela está dedicada a causas de esta, y solamente lo que quería decir esta noche es que les agradezco. Bienvenidos a nuestra escuela. Cualquier otro evento estamos aquí para apoyarlos, y también quería decirles que estamos aquí porque todos estamos trabajando para tu lucha, ¿okay? Porque tu lucha es la lucha de todos los latinos. Because your fight is the fight of all Latinos. Okay? Next, I would like to introduce Como Benjamin. So, otra vez, bienvenidos, and thank you.
We said revolutionary greetings to all of you. Buenas noches. This will be my presentation in Spanish. My name is Kamal Benjamin. I am an organizer with the now DC Metro Coalition in solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. But a little background on the solidarity organization that we represent now. It started at least 20 years ago. We had a coalition of individuals and organizations that were trying to put together a sister city, DC, together, but it never came off. So we evolved into the No War on Cuba organization coalition, and that lasted about, I'd say, 3-4 years. And then we evolved into the DC Metro Coalition to Free the Cuba 5, which we band together for the last 10 years, giving receptions for the ambassador and for the first secretary, ranging back from Alberto Prieto, Patricia Pago, Alex Rodriguez, and we also had a reception for the ambassador Cabanas. We are now the DC Metro Coalition in solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. And we will hang and struggle with it until we evolve into whatever. We want to free. We want to free Cuba. Our next presentation will be Bamboshi Shango, who is the chair, one of the chairs for the National Network on Cuba, and he will give you more history, I'm assuming, of the NNOC. And I will now let you.
I'm not Bamboshi, but we switched the schedule around behind Kamal's back. You'll probably beat me up for doing that. My name is Omari Musa. I'm with the DC Metro Coalition in solidarity with the Cuban Revolution as well. We have a couple of things that we'd like to do. There are people here tonight who have made this meeting successful. I think everyone should take a look around and see who's here tonight. I want to make, first I want to introduce a little message of solidarity that this meeting got. from where we're going to go in the future. This message is from Regina Stenson. Regina Stenson is a member of the Wives of Steel. These steel workers are then pushed out by ATI Steel Corporation, and she's begun 2,200 of them. And she's begun to learn a little bit about Cuba. And in her message to us, I'm not going to read it all, she explains part of their struggle, that is to fight against the lockout that they're now going through. But then she ends her message to us by saying this, and I'll quote it all. I would like to say a few words on Cuba. I am a work in progress with this situation. This is an area that I am proud to say that I'm educating myself on, but embarrassed to say that I only learned of the events here recently. Other than that, what I've seen in the news. But that being said, education is key to getting the word out about Cuba and the situation in regards to the embargo that the United States has imposed on that country. The solidarity being shown within the country, this country, after all the hardships that the Cubans are facing, is overwhelming. I look forward to learning more about this situation and being a voice in this fight as well. Keep up the good work, making your voices heard by all. So we can give her That's what we have to do, isn't it? Reach out to new people who are beginning to learn. That's the object of this and other meetings we'll have. Now, I want to, many people probably say, who are those young people up on the stage? I want to just read you a little bit about who they are. First, they include some of the youngest students from the United States going on the student travel program, as you saw. Some of them will be going in April of next year to Cuba to have an interchange with people of their age and their experience. They're from the Maryland International Day School, which is a private school right outside of the District of Columbia in Prince George's County. The school offers an academically rigorous dual language education, as you saw, to Spanish and English speaking students from pre-grade to 8th grade. They have a mission. It says, our mission is to encourage and enable students to become lifelong learners and responsible members of a diverse world community. And they say that their motto is, preparing tomorrow's ambassadors today is the core value and belief that define our school culture. So that's the young people that we saw performing right here. I want to introduce a person that I've known for a while. Her name is Gail Walker. She's the executive director, if I'm not mistaken, of IFCO Pastors for Peace. They've organized 27? 27.
It's close, we'll take it.
Yeah, okay. 27 brigades to Cuba, bringing medical equipment, caravans, and other equipment that the Cuban people would like and appreciate. Those of us who've been to Cuba have seen that they used to have a little yellow school bus. And those of us have seen, who've been to Cuba, they have seen on the streets the little yellow school bus. That was their symbol, at least in my mind, that was their symbol. Gail's organization, IFCO Pastors for Peace, is now under attack by the Internal Revenue Service. And we wanted to give her an opportunity to say a few words about what is the content of this attack and lay out what IFCO Pastors for Peace wants all of us to do to cooperate to beat back this attack. Gail Walker, please.
Thank you. No, this is fine. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for this opportunity, Kenya and Naima. And I was greeting our dear sister, Esther Donowa, who is a leader with these students and who's been to Cuba, thankfully, with IFCO Pastors for Peace, and wanted to make sure that she was greeted properly. And, of course, I want to say hello to our dear friend, Miguel Fraga, from the Cuban Embassy.
That's right.
Yes. I won't take long because we're really here to tonight to hear from our distinguished guests from Cuba, but I appreciate the opportunity just to contextualize our collective struggle. IFCO Pastors for Peace, as Omari was discussing, is really an organization that has organized caravans to Cuba since 1992 as an act of solidarity. Many of you have either supported the caravans or participated in them. As a result of that work and other work, we have been targeted by the IRS that is interested in trying to take away our non-profit status as a result of that solidarity. But we're not taking this struggle lying down. Right? We're standing up, we're fighting back, and many of you have been really central to this campaign of resistance. And we're profoundly grateful for that. We're grateful for what you've done, for what you will do. And I would just advise you to take a look at our website as a place to get information about that attack. It's ifconews.org. I'm available here to talk to anyone afterwards. But in short, as a result of the work that we've done in Cuba, the work that we've done to support through our fiscal sponsorship project, some of the most progressive programs, projects in the country, the IRS is trying to shut us down. We raise it now in this context because in the same way that Cuba has always stood up to the bullies, we're standing up to the bullying of our government in this regard. And we're, like I said, grateful for what you've done and will continue to do to support the continued work of IFCO, not only to do the progressive work that it does here in the United States, but to continue to be in solidarity with our dear friends in Cuba, whether that be through the caravans or through the medical school scholarship program that we're honored to be able to help facilitate. So I won't take any longer now, but I'm here and available to talk to anyone who's interested in learning more about the details of that attack. You can go to the website at ifconews.org to learn more details. We're asking people to sign on to a petition that will it goes directly to the Office of the Treasury, the IRS, to say stop attacking IFCO and allow it to continue to do its work in the area of social justice, human rights, civil rights, and I think that's as quickly as I can do that, Omari. He said, make it fast, make it fast. And but I'm as I said, we're really here to hear from our sisters from Cuba, and that promises to be a very powerful and informative event. So thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk.
Good evening. Good evening. I don't know if you can hear me. Yes. But this might make it a little easier.
Yes.
We have the honor and the pleasure tonight of bringing you a person, a sister, a comrade, a friend, who will give you information that you may or may not already have, and knowing the press, the corporate media in the U.S. you probably do not have. This young lady is an example of the youth and the future of Cuba. She is the president of ECAP. We bring you our sister, our comrade, our friend.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I would like to thank the dean of this school, a person that just with the passion that she has been able to welcome us I can translate very well his commitment with her commitment with everything related to respect to other peoples. And of course, I want to thank the DC Metro Coalition in solidarity with Cuba. I want to thank the National Network on Cuba, whose meeting has been coordinated to happen here in Washington, and Leyma Martinez, a member of our staff in charge of the solidarity relations with the U.S. movement, and myself. For us, it's a real pleasure to be here, and of course, to speak by ourselves. The name of this talk this evening is very accurate. And of course, to express to the excellent children that performed at the very beginning that they are doing very well in Spanish. And of course, the best thing that I enjoy, it was the way that they combined the personal expressions with Jose Marti's ideas. Because when you learn from Cuba, through the ideology and through the knowledge of Jose Marti, you will learn very soon that homeland is humanity. And it is what they were saying with the different phrases that they learned by heart in Spanish, and also the performance of Guantanamera. And of course, I want to thank the different co-chairs accompanying me and Leyma this evening, and to express our solidarity with IFCO Pastor for Peace, because they are indeed one of the organizations in the United States going to Cuba for more than 26 occasions, and they have been bringing every year more than 100 tons of humanitarian aid to Cuba, and they are a project going to Cuba challenging the U.S. on immoral blockade against our country, against our people. And they were created by a person that is one of the best friends of the Cuban Revolution, our comrade Lucius Walker. It is Gail's father. I want to pay tribute to Lucius Walker, because persons like him would have been able to see this day that we are enjoying today, the day that we see that the 5 Cubans are free back home, and the day that Cuba and the U.S. have rejoined diplomatic relations. I believe, Gail and comrades, that Lucius would have been very happy to see us all united and together and projecting our future this evening in Washington, D.C. It is Saturday evening, my God. I was just thinking that probably I won't meet many people, but we were talking with our representative of the embassy, our comrade Fraga, who's welcome, I also should say, and of course he's accompanying us during our visit to Washington. And to tell you that I thank you for that additional detail. For you to have this hour and a half to share your time and your knowledge with these Cubans coming to Washington in order to learn more from you, and also to explain a little more about our reality. And immediately, I would like just to express few main aspects of the current conjuncture in our country, in Cuba, and of course to inform a little bit about the Cuban-US relations and how we could do in order to rid out of the immoral US blockade against Cuba. First of all, that's true that last July the 20th, our embassy was open here in Washington, and since August the 14th, we have the US Embassy in Havana, and we consider it is a very important progress that we have made. It is important to have these 2 embassies. And of course, last December the 17th, our 2 presidents had a very important presentation in front of the media. The announcements that were made are very important for all of us. It is very important to see that we have today diplomatic channels of communication, and of course to see that our governments are having different rounds of talks, and committees have been created in order to transmit all the opinions and to debate and to decide the new steps forward in order to do what we call the process towards the normalization of the relations between Cuba and the United States. And we say that in that projection because we believe that we are sure that in 117 years there haven't been any normal relations between Cuba and the US. So it is a long process, and believe me, we are confident that if we continue acting with respect to the Cuban sovereignty, if we continue with this professional understanding that the two parts are being shown so far, we consider that more progress will be made thanks to the professionality and the professionalism, and thanks to the different aspects, the seriousness of the people that is representing the two sides. Of course, the decisions made by President Obama are positive, and we welcome those decisions because no president in the history of the United States, at least in the recent history, has had that decision, have made that very important decision. Of course, the blockade is still there. Some people here, when I hear my comrade mentioning that you will know things that probably the media is not saying, I will put an example about this phenomena. Some people is assuming that we have diplomatic relations and that automatically it was the end of the blockade. No, it is wrong. It is one of the main confusions that we find today in the public opinion, and it is very interesting in our opinion to share with you this view. It is important to tell you that last October the 27th, it was a resolution presented by the Cuban government to demand in front of the UN General Assembly the lifting of the US blockade. And the resolution was voted and supported by 191 countries of the world, and just 2 countries voted against, the US government and Israel. So it is a very important victory. It is not only a victory in a diplomatic field, it is a victory in terms of the common sense of the international community, because in the past, and Cuba has been presenting that resolution to the UN General Assembly during 24 years now, and the last voting, it was every year we presented, and it was 188 votes in favor of the lifting and some abstentions. 3 abstentions at the past. Now we don't see any country abstain. It was 191 in favor of the lifting of the US blockade against Cuba, and 2 countries supporting the blockade. It is the US government and the government of Israel. So in this moment, one of the things that probably is interesting, and especially for some people that is coming to the School of Law here in this university, is to go and look for more information about the legal aspects or the legal arguments to keep the US blockade against Cuba. Imagine that it is justified under the Trading with the Enemy Act that was here in the United States approved in 1917. So we are talking about a law, a very old and old-fashioned law that is applied against Cuba, against our country, against our people. And a few months ago, we know that different US representatives has considered that the US policy on Cuba is a failure, that they have to change the policy. So if 191 countries are against the blockade, if the law is back of 1917, if Cuba is resisting, and the Cuban political system, that it is socialism, is there in place, and we will continue building our own economic and political system, which are the reasons for the current government, especially for the US Congress, the one that have to lift the law that justify the US blockade. So it is important for us to tell you that it is very interesting to look for more information on that. The blockade is not only sanctions against Cuba from the US government, it has an extraterritorial impact. There are some laws. It is one law that is considered, is known by the Helms-Burton law, And they established, with the Helms-Burton Law, the extraterritorial character of the U.S. sanctions against Cuba. It means, for example, that if you are in Mexico, if you are in Bahamas or in any country of the world, if you want to have trade with Cuba, if you are a businessman or woman and you want to invest in Cuba, you are going to suffer the same financial persecution and the same restrictions and the different kinds of pressures that the US government is imposing against Cuba, against our finances. And of course, the blockade is not only something that is preventing Cuba to have access to the biggest market of the world, that it is the US market, but also it is something that is having the intention to stop us to have a normal relation between the people of Cuba and the people of the United States. And I believe that it is another very powerful reason to campaign against the US blockade, because no blockade, no sanctions should be imposed to the free exchange of ideas, to the solidarity and to the good communication and understanding among people. So we consider that we should fight the blockade not only because of its illegal character, but also because of the intention to stop us, our two peoples, to be in good and respectful communication. Another aspect that is very important for us is to tell you that we are networking around the world in order to have more support for the closing of the illegally occupied territory in Guantanamo. You know that the US is occupying our territory. Not only the horrible prison that was opened there in Guantanamo, no. The territory that is occupied for more than a century by the US, illegally occupied, should return to the Cuban sovereignty. It is a very important campaign that we are promoting. The people of Cuba, the government of Cuba, the civil society of Cuba, and individuals of Cuba around the world, we need that territory to return to our sovereignty. It is a very important thing to demand to the international community, and of course, we don't see that there could be normal relations between Cuba and the United States with that territory illegally occupied. So it is a very important aspect also we should achieve in terms of our struggle to preserve our sovereignty and our independence. In addition to that, I would like to tell you that we receive as a very positive signal the decision to establish relations, but at the same time, we see that there is a double standard speech regarding our situation in Cuba, because new regime change programs are being established against our political system. It means that every year, the US administration has been investing around $20 million US in order to finance regime change programs against Cuba. It means that they consider they should empower the Cuban people. They consider that Cubans do not know how to handle our democracy, that they should explain and teach us how to do our participation system and many other things. And I can tell you, we live in Cuba, we are there, we know that our society is not perfect at all, but I can tell you that in Cuba, we achieved independence and sovereignty, and we decided to build our system in the way it is the best for the Cuban people. We have people's power. The way we call our democratic system is people's power, el poder popular. And when we talk about people's power, it means that we have not only the electoral process, because we understand that participation and democracy is not only to elect your people. We have elections every 5 years, we have local elections every 2 years and a half, and recently we had elections for the national parliament, and it is very interesting for us to inform you that it is a very important process of renovation in our national parliament. 68% of our current parliament is newly elected. It means that compared to the previous one, new people is coming to participate in the decision making. And another interesting result of the current electoral process, it was that we are 48.8 women in parliament, 48.8%. In parliament, it is Cuba is one of the 3 main parliaments in the world with this women composition, and we are very proud to see that we are sharing that very good results with countries in Latin America like Bolivia, that is also having a very good standard of participation. And I have to tell you that in Latin America, women participation in politics is improving faster than in the rest of the world, and including in the North. It means that all the processes that we are living in Latin America, in order to have better functioning in our democratic system, in people's participation, is not only something that we are achieving, but also many other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean countries, thanks to the new progressive governments that are in our countries, like in Venezuela, in Ecuador, in Bolivia, and in many, many other countries in Latin America. And we think that Cuba is not an exception. We also are committed to have a better democratic system, to influence more and more in the decision making. But the way we do things so far is the way that we consider is more of the satisfaction of our people. Of course, Cuba is 45 minutes away from Florida, and you all know that if you look to the map. And Cuba has been suffering during more than 57 years now all the aggressions coming from the different U.S. administrations. We have been victims of state terrorism. In Cuba, we have 5,577 victims of state terrorism. It means, for instance, we have a population of 11.2 million Cubans, and it means that every 4 blocks, we have 1 victim of state terrorism in Cuba. So when you look to the past, and you analyze the present conjuncture, I have to tell you that, of course, it is a very important moment, and of course, we won't forget about the memories of the struggles, of the resistance that we have had as the people, and of course, we are decided not to forget about the past. We don't have any sense of revenge either. We want normal, peaceful, and respectful relations between Cuba and the United States. And we feel that we could achieve that thanks to the good understanding of the 2 countries, of our 2 governments. So the U.S. Congress has the key. The U.S. Congress should cancel, should eliminate? Eliminate.
Revoke.
Revoke, thank you. I have a very good teacher here. The U.S. Congress should revoke that law that approves the U.S. blockade against Cuba, because it creates suffering in our people. It creates also human and economic damage to the Cuban people, the lack of access to important medicines that are just produced by U.S. laboratories. For instance, we have 130,000 patients suffering from Alzheimer, and just the laboratory, the Pfizer laboratory, is the one in this world producing that medicine. So what to do? Are we going to allow Cubans just to die expecting that medicine to come? We have to do things, and in fact, we are doing many things in order to guarantee and to preserve the many achievements that we have in Cuba. In Cuba, you know, probably you don't know, but I tell you this evening, we have free education for everyone, free health care for everyone, and when we say free, it is free. Hospitals, no matter how complex the surgery is, you could go and you will find doctors. But in addition to that, despite the U.S. blockade, Cuba has been solidarious with many countries of the world. Despite the U.S. blockade, internationalism and cooperation is a principle for the Cuban people, for the Cuban Revolution, not only recognized by our Constitution, it is a permanent exercise. Currently, more than 50,000 Cubans are cooperating with more than 65 countries of the world, including 35 African countries, where we have doctors and where we have people in different technical areas transmitting our experiences in those areas. 27 countries of this world has been benefited from the Yo Si Puedo, Yes I Can program. It is a program, a literacy method, a method to teach how to read and write to the peoples of the world. And we have been able to do so in many countries, including in the indigenous communities in Australia, where we went last June to participate at the National Convention in Solidarity with Cuba, and I was very proud to see an indigenous leader over there thanking Cuba and thanking our teachers for sharing with them that method in English, and then allowing them to use the Cuban method in order to give the skills to read and write to this indigenous population. And of course, I don't want to speak longer, but I would like to ask you to support us in this very important campaign to lift the U.S. blockade against Cuba, to stop all these prohibitions for the U.S. citizens to travel to Cuba. There are still restrictions, or I would say the restrictions for you to travel openly to Cuba are still in place. So the U.S. citizens cannot go to Cuba without applying for a license. And it is important for you to know that our institute and many Cuban institutions are open to receive the U.S. people. And of course, if you are coming to Cuba, if you are coming in challenge, or if you are coming with different kinds of visits programs, please do that applying for ethical travels. It means that you should respect the sovereignty of Cuba, because we know that some people is going there in order to fulfill the requirements of the regime change programs. And we advise you, if you understand that it is the right thing to be done, and I hope so, please to go to Cuba, but respecting the Cuban reality, respecting our institutions. We are a country that is organized. We have our institutions. We have people that is ready to receive you. And of course, there is not any hegemonic knowledge. Each of us has many things to learn from Cuba, from the United States, and I hope it is something that is going to be very positive. Of course, to tell the truth about Cuba, not black in black or white, to tell the truth that is very diverse. A country that has many challenges in front, a country that is updating the Cuban economy, is updating the Cuban socialism, but of course, we are updating socialism not for going back to capitalism. It is updating. It is updating. Receive our solidarity, our sincere solidarity with the different struggles that you have here in the United States. I'm very grateful to receive people that is involved in different campaigns and social movements here in the U.S. They have been able to visit us in different moments. And of course, Cuba will keep our foreign affairs unchanged. Our foreign affairs committed with all the progressive causes of the world, our foreign affairs and our principles that Cuba won't change, and any of these principles, any of the internal topics of the Cuban reality are on the table of dialogue or negotiation. They are untouched, and the only ones allowed to decide on that are us, the Cuban people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have also Lena here tonight. We want to open the floor to question and answers. We will have a mic at the beginning of each row. We ask you to form a line, ask your questions. We have qualified people to answer them. However, we would rather that you do not make speeches. I think the speech has been made. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't mention that we thank the U.S. Black Law Students Association and the UDC Latino Law Students Association. You don't have questions?
I'm a human.
We are going to have questions.
Yeah, so just make it up. Be line behind me.
Franklin, Mr. Franklin, you stand in one place and people
Yeah,
will
over
line
here.
up.
Over here. So.
Well, thank you very much for your speech and welcome to Washington. My name is Oscar Ordenes. I am a member of the DC Coalition in Solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, and I am also a member of the Washington area Bolivian presence of the movement towards socialism, the instrument for political sovereignty of the peoples. And first of all, I would like to thank the Cuban people and the Cuban government for having given back the eyesight to 600,000 Bolivians. And also for having helped turn Bolivia into one of 3 countries in South America with zero illiteracy. Thank you so much. Now, my question is the following. In the chapter that perhaps you didn't mention is the compensation for the damage caused by the blockade. Do you also include the profit that was taken by the American companies for 1 century of exploitation of Cuba in those compensations? Because the American company says Cuba owes us because we had equipment there. So back to my question, do you take that into account? Thank you so much.
Well, in fact, what we have considered is the blockade since the beginning. Yeah, what we have, thank you for your solidarity and for everything you said. It is our duty, of course, to be solidarity with you. We include the 56 years of the blockade. So we don't include the 100 years because if it is so, my God, it is going to be a lot. But of course, this method to calculate the damages, it is to have something to present as the proof. You know that it is internationally, there are many different ways to do so. And we have approved a law in Parliament in order to have that record in a very sophisticated way, so that in the moment that we have to present, those damages are accurately measured by our side, but not 100 years, but more than 50 years of blockade, I think it's a lot. And of course, like you said, yes, they are presenting interest in talking about the nationalization that at the beginning of the Cuban Revolution, the Cuban revolutionary government did. And I hope these conversations will go through technical aspects, but also the political analysis that the U.S. Government is the one imposing the blockade against Cuba. The U.S. government is the one applying state terrorism against Cuba. The U.S. government is the one occupying a territory in Cuba. So Cuba has to do things bad. The victim of this situation has been Cuba, not the U.S. government. So let us think in a very correct way and let us analyze it. And of course, in the future, we hope those problems are going to be solved. If not, we will continue struggling for that for hundreds of years in front. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. It's an honor to meet delegates from Cuba. I was on the Venceremos Brigade in 1976, many years ago, and I'm with the National Jericho Movement around political prisoners. And we want to thank your government and the people of Cuba for protecting Asada Shakur. Your government has said that she is non-negotiable. And we take that as 100% accuracy. So whenever it has come up, we say we can trust the Cuban government and we know she will be safe. So thank you very much. Thank you.
My name is Cliff Smith. I've been a proud card carrier of airplanes for Cuban Committee for over 50 years. Even when I was in the State Department. I applied for Venceremos Brigade while I was still in the State Department. I got kicked out of state Actually, I was accepted for Venceremos Brigade, but I wasn't able to go. The Cuban government accepted that I was legitimate in wanting to go, but other members of the brigade thought I was a spy. Anyway, I have a question, and this is that being in the School of Law here, what is the legal justification that the U.S. government has for staying in Guantanamo? I heard there was a 99-year lease. Is that lease expired? What is the big lease that the U.S. government has for staying in Guantanamo?
Well, it is what they say because, of course, they have been there for more than 100 years, and you are, many people here, specialists in law, when it is more than a century, the contracts and all kinds of agreements could expire. Is that like this, Martin? Okay, so it is something that, remember that when they agree about that, it reads that the day that the two governments agree, the occupation will end. So it is what cannot be solved until today, because remember they added the Platt Amendment that allowed the U.S. government to intervene in Cuba as many times as they considered. So the Platt Amendment was revoked, but not the law, the agreement between the two governments, and now we are expecting a new rationality to come, and through peaceful means and through international legal analysis, we could see the Guantanamo illegally occupied territory to return to our sovereignty. Yeah. Yeah, Selma?
I would like to add to that question that when the agreement was settled, Cuba was not independent.
Exactly.
So it was an agreement between the U.S. government and the government that the U.S. had in Cuba. So it is not an agreement between countries. That's why it's so impossible to solve the situation, because it said, the law said, as Kenya was mentioning, that when the two parts agree, so the agreement will be erased. So it's very difficult to solve that. That's why Cuba is always saying, and our expertise and our lawyers and our researchers are presenting the idea that the illegal part is when the agreement was signed.
My name is Jonathan Hutto. Thank you for all you give and continue to give. And thanks to the All-African People's Revolutionary Party for intervening in my affairs about 20 years ago and ensuring that I was a delegate on the World Youth Festival, Festival of Youth and Students of Havana. This was 1997. So thank you both. You come out. I love you both. My question specifically is on organizing in the sense of what we can do here specifically. What targets in this country, I'm a political organizer, everyone here is, and I believe this, and this is a solidarity organizing meeting, so I hope I'm not taking no one's fire, but what can I come out of this room and do tomorrow, tonight? Some politician need to focus on, some office need to sleep in, some letter need to write, somebody need to go visit, like yesterday. Just give me some assignments.
Normally, we are very respectful about the decision you make on your internal affairs as a movement. But of course, the main aspect is to leave the U.S. blockade. So that decision should be made in Congress. So it is necessary to go and do the lobby actions that some groups here are some experience in doing. Of course, to inform the public opinion here in the U.S. for us is a very important thing, because Cuba has been suffering a media campaign in order to distort the Cuban reality, and I believe that using the alternative media, using the social media, and people-to-people exchange, I mean, going to places, to the communities, telling people what is really happening in Cuba, why the blockade is still in place, I believe that it is a very good contribution. Another thing is, there are some of the co-chairs and members of the National Network on Cuba, probably one of them or some people here wants to add some answers to your question. But I have been able to participate in 2 meetings of the National Network on Cuba. And I see that every time they are better organized. They have organized, for instance, one initiative that it was the Days of Actions Against the U.S. Blockade here in Washington last September, and it was a very good, very important thing because it creates that environment, the possibility to have impact in the U.S. media and in the people of the U.S. So to go in the different constituencies to ask the members of the U.S. Congress, please to work and present initiatives in order to lift the travel ban, in order to leave the U.S. blockade, in order to do something in order to finish, to end the occupation of Guantanamo and so on. I believe these are very, very important contributions. We receive also many groups visiting Cuba. I think that it's another very important contribution because you cannot defend something that you don't know. So when you visit Cuba and you understand how it is and why do we do things like we do, it is another way to inspire your actions in our reality that is very special, I think, and you can really see how the grassroots organizations in Cuba, the community organizations, and the different institutions functions, and then to come back to the States in order to share that experience. What else, Leima? What else do you advise to? Thank you for your questions.
Hi, bienvenidas compañeras.
Gracias.
My name is Leslie Salgado. I'm an activist from Howard County, Maryland, leading the Howard County Friends of Latin America for almost 30 years. And in solidarity with Cuba, Cuba has been always an inspiration, an example to all of us. My question is regarding ICAP. And the reason why I'm asking is because we work with several sectors of society, some who are professionals who can afford to travel to Cuba paying high prices. And as you can it has become very popular now to take people to Cuba, but a lot of the costs, the trips that are offered are very highly priced. And I want to continue to encourage people to travel to Cuba, to learn from Cuba, and not go as tourists. I want to be able to encourage students, low income, and professionals to come to Cuba. How can ICAP, and can you talk a little bit more about ICAP? Because I know you play a huge role of the different opportunities that you are creating, not only for the people here in the United States, for people all over the world. Can you talk about that, please?
Thank you so much. Well, the two of us could say something in order to share the experiences. ICAP is a social organization, and we are going to celebrate 55 years this December. So we're created at the very beginning of the Cuban Revolution, and we have contacts and different actions in solidarity with Cuba and with the peoples of the world in 153 countries of the world, with more than 2,000 associations and groups that are active in these aspects of the, in the campaign against the blockade and in the many other priorities that I mentioned at the beginning. Of course, it is a very important question regarding how expensive it is now, because, for instance, there is an increase in the prices in the ticket flights and also in the hotels and also in the tourist transport in Cuba. What we do, ICAP has our own travel agency, and what we do is, for instance, we have some facilities that are very modest. We have an international camp in Havana, 45 minutes away from the center of Havana, in the Caimito municipality. It belongs to Artemisa, where the Venceremos Brigade and many other brigades are coming. We receive people from 70 countries of the world every year coming as volunteers in the movement of the international world brigades. And what we do is to guarantee lower prices for those people going to these specific kinds of programs. We spend with them as an average of 15 days. They go to the communities, they share experiences with different organizations in the communities. They receive conferences from expertise in the different areas that they ask us to prepare for them. We also do voluntary work in the camp alongside Caimito in our international camp, or we go to cooperatives with a new economic model. We are including more and more the exchange of our visitors with these new examples and new experiences of the self-employment and people that has been receiving land to make it produce just as a free usufructo, a free usufruct in Cuba. And the experience is very interesting because we bring them to a province. All the brigades are going for 15 days, but the ones coming from the Nordic countries and from Australia and New Zealand, that we have different brigades coming from very far, as the ticket flights are very expensive, they spend in Cuba 21 days. It means that they are in Cuba now. We are expecting them next December, and they spend the end of the year. We celebrate the triumph of the revolution, and then they return to their countries in the second week of January. What else, Lynn?
No, ECAP has a lot of experience in networking different groups from different places to the institutions in Cuba. So we have always said that we are ready to be the bridge between the two countries. We have had the experience of connecting different people with lawyers, educators, because all of them every year they have international events. So it is better to participate sometimes in international events so you can balance or the program you have in Cuba. It is true that the U.S. Students cannot travel as tourists, that you have to travel with a purpose. So if that is in that way, what we are trying to do is that purpose makes sense, so that you take advantage of your stay in Cuba. We are having in the next month more than 48 groups from the United States, only through Amistur travel agency, that it is a travel agency of ECAP. So we are the North America division. We are helping the managers and the commercials of Amistur to have better programs with these ideas of first the prices that you are mentioning, but also to meet with as many institutions and as many people as possible. In your free time in Cuba, of course, you're going to meet people in the streets, you're going to go to communitarian projects, you're going to walk through the Havana Malecon or to any other province in Cuba, because that is another thing that I wanted to share with you, that it is important to go to the capital cities, but it is tremendously, a very good experience to visit different provinces, because Havana is a part of Cuba, not just Cuba, and the rural areas have received the impact of the achievements of the revolution in a way that you will have that you will differentiate what the very fast people of Havana with the very good ideas of our places and institutions in our provinces. And that is something that ECAP, together with Amistur, we can provide. Thank you.
Just, as a comment, perhaps, for those people who are not aware of what ECAP is, the acronym.
The Cuban Institute for Friendship with the People.
And what is the purpose about that institute? What is exactly it doing?
To receive people from all over the world to see Cuba and express our solidarity with the peoples of the world. That's the main objective.
My name is Gloria Scott. I'm with the Socialist Workers Party. I'm also working at Walmart Party Fight for $15 an hour and a union. And I'm also part of the fight against police brutality in this country. And someone who's in attendance here tonight was explaining to me how women are part of the fight, or leaders in the fight against police brutality in this country. And I just think it would be really great if we had a government in this country which would reflect that type of leadership from the working class, or local, federal, local, state, and federal levels. It would be how much more better off we would be if that was the case. I know that the fight against police brutality under Batista was part of the revolutionary struggle to get rid of him. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you so much. Of course, it belongs to the past of the Cuban Revolution. I mean, the revolution was made exactly in order to eliminate those kind of abuses and brutality against the people of Cuba, and to really conquer a system where democratic and human rights are protected and guaranteed for everyone in Cuba. And of course, our student leaders were assassinated by thousands in Cuba. To be member of the University Students Federation, it was like similar to be persecuted, and of course, at the end, many of them were assassinated. And at the triumph of the revolution, all these organizations united, and they are part of the current institutions and the Communist Party of Cuba. So I believe that not only to eliminate the police brutality in the past, it was one achievement, but also to organize our people and to organize, like I said before, the people's power system that is inclusive of all these experiences of the revolutionaries in the past, and to achieve new victories in terms of people's participation in Cuba, to make it better, to guarantee a better process of decision-making in Cuba. It is our current struggle. And of course, we know that to preserve the Cuban Revolution is to preserve the idea that we won't go back to that past anymore, of course.
Mark Weisbrot, and thank you very much for sharing this information with us. I had a question. We really appreciate this. We need this. Those of us who are fighting to make the United States into a more law-abiding country that respects the sovereignty of other countries. And on March 9th of this year, the U.S. government imposed sanctions on Venezuela. And then a week, and this, the Cuban government, which is a very solidaristic government, of course, reacted very strongly. Fidel and Raul Castro and also the foreign minister made strong statements. And they also, it appears from the press, made it clear to the U.S. government that if they wanted to continue negotiations about continuing to open relations with Cuba or normalize relations with Cuba, that they would have to, they couldn't simply replace Cuba with another target in the hemisphere. And the U.S. government responded to that. They had a period of where actually President Obama actually talked to, met with President Maduro, first time since 14, 15 years for that kind of meeting. And also sent his top diplomat down there and so on. Now we have elections coming up in a month in Venezuela. The U.S. is back into regime change mode and has many allies and right-wing parliamentarians and so on. I won't go on too long, but I want to know, can you tell us anything about what you think Cuban government's position is and will be in these coming weeks if they attempt, as they did in 2013, to delegitimize the election? Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we take the 4 questions, because we're about to finish, and we don't want anyone to leave with questions.
4 more questions, and then we break, for the reception.
Yeah, is that okay for you?
Is that okay?
If you don't mind, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Alexander Vasquez. I'm a first-year law student here. I guess my question for you is, you were speaking about updating socialism, not going back, reverting back to capitalism. I moved to Washington from Miami, and one of the more exciting news that we got in Miami this year was that cruises are going to start becoming available to visit Cuba, and so a lot of people are really, cruises, right? Yeah. So a lot of people were really excited about that. Wow, we might have a chance to actually go to Cuba, especially from a place like Miami because it's so close, the proximity. But what set off some red flags for me was that the cruises were corporations, like Carnival Corporation, I think is one of the names. And so my question is, Cuba has resisted these, unramped capitalism for so long. What kind of things do you foresee them? Once we get to the final end goal of lifting the embargo, what kind of things, what kind of measures do you think the Cuban government will do to prevent reverting back to that capitalism and creating, some of the inequalities that we have here in this country? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Greg Davis. I'm actually one of the UDC law students who's going to be going on the trip to Havana in January, for which I'm extremely appreciative and excited. My question is, as both countries work toward ending the blockade, the embargo, a few questions seem to repeatedly come up, a few big issues, one of which the first questioner referred to what the U.S. would call expropriation claims. You mentioned another, economic damages. What do you see as the 2 or 3 biggest issues, biggest impediments to resolving the blockade and normalizing relations to that degree?
Thank you. Welcome to Cuba when you come.
Hi, I'm Pepe Rossi, and I'm with the Cuba Solidarity Group in Albany, New York. I first of all want to thank Cuba for being the best friend of Puerto Rico's right to self-determination and for the freedom of expression. My question is, with the growth of the private sector in Cuba, what measures will the revolution take to ensure that this private sector does not abuse its new wealth and privilege?
Thank you.
Buenas noches. Voy a poner la nota de diferencia, voy a hablar en español, para dar al pie el compañero. Solamente para traer un saludo, un abrazo, pero profundo, de parte de los trabajadores ecuatorianos que militamos en el Partido Socialista Revolucionario Ecuatoriano dentro de los Estados Unidos. Es un diminuto comité de trabajadores socialistas que están aquí presentes para saludar la revolución cubana.
Muchas gracias.
An example of socialist cooperation, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Cuba, the future. So this is to give you a very heartfelt, a very deep abrazo to you, and to tell you that we do it in the name of the Socialist Workers Party of Ecuadorians in the Washington area.
Y saludar a ese diminuto país territorialmente hablando, pero que se ha convertido en el gigante de América y del mundo, cuya luz tenemos que seguir los pueblos de todo el mundo, y en Estados Unidos los hablantes de hispanos vamos a seguir ese ejemplo. Muchas gracias.
It is to tell you that we are very much aware that such a small country as Cuba has become a world giant, and a giant whose example we must follow all over the world, including the Latin Americans who live in the United States. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Last but not least, good evening. My name is Paul Pumphrey, and I'm with Friends of the Congo, and I'd like to say that we are very appreciative to the support that Cuba did back in 1961 in joining the people, the freedom fighters in the Congo, fighting against after the killing of Patrice Lumumba. And I just didn't want you all to come and leave without recognizing that point. That a lot of people know about Angola, but a lot of people don't know that Cuba, many years before Angola, was in Africa giving support to African liberation.
Thank you.
Sí, si la gente quiere otro, pues.
I'm kind of confused.
Si la gente tiene otro, if people have any other questions, other than the people in line, they should line up behind him.
Yes, it's four, and then we continue. Okay? Okay, Lena? Yeah?
Okay, about the updating of socialism and the possibility of receiving cruisers in Cuba and not to go back to capitalism. Well, first of all, I have to say that all the investments that foreign companies will eventually do in Cuba as possible cruisers to Havana, Cienfuegos, and I have heard that probably in another province, will go through the foreign investment law that Cuba approved last year. So that foreign investment law said that the companies must follow the regulations that we have for environment, the regulations we have for unions, the regulations we have in the Ministry of Tourism. So in Cuba, a couple of months ago, we had the kind of a fair of tourism, and Cuba was promoting the first type of ethical travels, but also those possibilities to expand the different not markets, but packages, so that people in the cruisers can have the possibility to meet with the people of the local places, but not to damage the system and the structures we have there. As far as I know, the cruisers are still in the process of talking to the authorities. One of the things is that we need also in Cuba to repair or to create facilities for those cruisers to go. For more than 55 years, Cuba was not allowed to receive these cruisers, so the Ministry of Tourism, of course, has to create the infrastructure for that. But giving the opportunities for more tourists to go to Cuba doesn't mean that we are going to go back to capitalism. Why? Because the incomes of the touristic, for example, I can mention, some of you have visited Havana, and there is a very good project led by the historian of the city, that the incomes of the touristic area goes to the communities and goes to the restoration of the buildings and the institutions. And also the incomes of the private sector, that it is very linked to the opportunities for that was open through tourism. They also have to pay taxes that are redistributed in the Cuban population that has been during all these years. So our possibilities to open to tourism are going to be done through the regulations we have and through the possibilities for distributing the incomes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, thank you, Leima. Regarding the decision made by the U.S. government to consider Venezuela a threat for the national security, and the comment made by the comrade regarding the next elections in Venezuela and the possibility of not recognizing the results. Of course, our position is very clear. We have a position of principles in all these kind of scenarios. We have ratified our solidarity with Venezuela. You know, probably you know that we have more than 40,000 cooperants in Venezuela, contributing with the healthcare and other areas in Venezuela. And of course, in many international organizations, starting by CELAC, the Community of Latin American States organization, we are very clear that any country in Latin America will accept
like a new style coup d'etat against the government of Maduro and the democratically elected officials in Venezuela. So it is necessary to start just now in order to inform the people here in the US and everywhere we can, in order to explain that there is this similar phenomena that is happening with Cuba in these 57 years is the same method that they are applying against Venezuela. Sanctions, economic war, soft power mechanisms in order to undermine the Venezuelan Bolivarian revolution, and also they are trying to create the lack of confidence in the people of Venezuela in front of the government. Remember, when they declared the blockade against Cuba, it is written that it was to create a discontent in the Cuban people in front of the government, and then to make the people think that the government was responsible for the scarcities, the economic situations, and so on. And then they wanted the Cuban people to feel that the Cuban government was the one that is a real unresponsible for the situation in the country. So it is the same what is happening in Venezuela today. Of course, our parliament is in solidarity with the parliament of Venezuela. There is a movement of observers, international observers, in order to accompany the Venezuelan people. And we all know that if there is a country in today's world that is world champion in elections, it is Venezuela. They do elections every 1 or 2 years. They have different elections. It is the electoral system that is probably one of the most safe in terms of the kind of informatics resources that they have invested in order to guarantee the safety and the accuracy of the people's will expressed through the popular vote. So I believe that Commander Chavez, one of his main decisions was to really make the Venezuelan people to participate in politics. And now President Maduro is facing many challenges, but they are in a very important moment to ratify their decision to be independent, to be sovereign, and we should support that decision of the Venezuelan people. So our position is very, very clear on that, and to denounce all the media campaign against the Venezuelan people. Another thing has to do with the 3 main obstacles that we feel, right? So of course the blockade, it is the main obstacle for saying that we have normal relations with the United States, the occupation of Guantanamo, and the other obstacle is the continuity of the regime change programs. In my view, these are the 3 main obstacles that we have, because the 3 of them are trying to ignore the Cuban system, the political system that we have chosen by ourselves. And it is a fundamental principle in the UN Charter. Each country has the right to choose the political, economic, and social and cultural system that this country deserves. It is what we call the right to self-determination. So I think that in this new moment in Latin America, the US government should start to change the policy, not only with Cuba, but with Latin America and with the peoples of the world, in order to understand that we are not the backyard anymore. We are independent countries. We have our own empowerment, and we are able to decide ourselves. So, if we solve these 3, I think it is going to be the moment to see that it is normal relations between our 2 countries. But you, in this School of Law, will work in order that to happen. I think so. Thank you. And of course, you mentioned other things.
No, there was the last question about the growing private sector and
yes. It's similar to the situation with the cruises. Listen, comrades, the private sector in Cuba is just less than 15% of the Cuban gross domestic product. The majority of the wealth that is produced in Cuba, it is produced by the state enterprises. So that's true that we have an increasing amount of Cubans involved in the private sector, what we call the self-employment. It is 500,000 Cubans already in those practices, but it is part of the new economic model, but it is not the main part of the new economic model. In addition to that, If you look to the guidelines, when you listen our people, Cubans saying the guidelines, it means 313 guidelines approved by the Communist Party of Cuba, approved by the Parliament of Cuba, that established the policy of the Cuban Revolution in economic terms and in social terms. And there is one guideline, guideline number 3. It is in internet, you could find it, but I have to put this example because of the question. Guideline number 3 reads, somehow, we won't accept to create accumulation of capital in individual hands or in the hands of personas naturales or individuals in Cuba. It means that we are not going to allow the concentration of capital, of money in few hands. It is one of the mechanisms that allowed us as a system that if you earn more, if you have more incomes, you have to pay higher taxes. Because in our country, it is one of the characteristics of the model. We have chosen to be a socialist country where the human beings are protected, where people have to be safe. So we don't care if you work a lot, you will have better incomes. But please, you cannot exploit other peoples. You cannot live under the efforts of other peoples. You should work and you should earn money, as many money as you consider you should produce, but you should contribute then in a higher amount of taxes to the social development of the country, because it is what socialism is about. So it is a characteristic and it is what we are doing. That's why Lehman spoke about the foreign investment law. These people is not going to Cuba with a luggage of dollars investing everywhere they want. In Cuba we have laws. Our law for foreign investment is very clear. We decide the priorities, we decide the mechanisms through which any foreign investor has to go through in order to decide if we need it or not. We are very well protected in front of the el lavado de dinero, money laundering, thank you. We are very, we have made many things in order to preserve our country, that we are 11.2 million Cubans. It is a small country, but we have decided to keep citizen security and people's life in a better condition and with dignity. That is all what we are preserving. So it doesn't mean we don't have challenges and risks. We do have them. But in terms of the laws and in terms of the consciousness we believe that we are ready to face these new challenges that we have in front of us. Lema?
Hi, my name is Sylvie Bello, and I'm with the Cameroon American Council. We're an African immigrant advocacy group here in DC. As one of my colleagues mentioned, thank you for the work that Cuba does in Africa. Specifically, thank you for your recent work around Ebola in Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. And my question is around Cuba and Africa, and what do you think about the South-South collaboration with the meeting conference coming up in Ecuador? How does, within the parliament, your committees and committees, what around economic advancement in the do you feel that South collaboration and Latin America, or Latinos prioritizing that conversation? And I ask this because there are a couple of African countries that are looking into diaspora ministries. One of them is Cameroon. We're looking to start a campaign about around diaspora ministry, like government ministry in Cameroon. But other countries such as like Nigeria, for instance, has a diaspora committee within their parliament. Cote d'Ivoire already has a diaspora ministry, Ghana. So it's a two-part question. One is, what are your priorities within the parliament on foreign policy towards Africa? And when it comes to South-South collaboration, how are Afro-Latinos, Afro-Cubans prioritized in that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, of course, Africa is a priority. Cuba is an observer at the summits of the African Union. And Cuba is considered a member of the 6th region. You know that in the African understanding, you have the 5 regions, and the additional is the 6th one that has to do with the diaspora. And Cuba has been considered by the African Union a leading member of the 6th region. We have, the main priority is in the healthcare area, where we have been sending human resources, like you know, in 35 countries we have cooperation, concrete cooperation brigades and people in the countries. We have also a very important scholarship program for Africa. We have students from 118 countries of the world, and I believe 43 countries from Africa. And now what we are doing is to combine. Everywhere we have the medical brigades, they are also preparing their future doctors for each country, because it gives sustainability to the process, not to create dependence on the Cuban presence, but to create the conditions. And we opened a school of medicine 40 years ago, for instance, in Yemen, and that experience has been very well received in other African countries, to send professors in order to open the School of Medicine in many countries in Africa. Of course, another thing has to do with supporting the demand that Africa has for the reparations because of the damages of colonialism and all the exploitation of imperialism in Africa. Another priority for us has to do with having a very active role in the non-aligned movement, where that movement, you remember, that established a vanguard position in the times of the Cold War, and then we, although the Cold War has ended in certain way, but we still have a very good cooperation with all the African countries in the political aspects. We defend also the rights of all the African countries to be members of the different bodies at the United Nations. Now that we are debating regarding the democratization of the United Nations, we think that Africa should have one member of the Council, the Security Council, and the right to veto and so on, because Africa is not only the origin of the human beings, but you have a huge amount of population. You should be allowed to be permanent member of the Security Council. What else? Well, we have several groups, parliamentarian groups in solidarity with several African countries, more than 32 as far as I remember. So parliaments in Africa have groups in solidarity with Cuba, and our parliament has 85 groups in solidarity with other parliaments, and 32 of them